Hey guys, my name is Waffles. Welcome to a full class guide on Shadowers. Shadowers are actually a mixed bag among the community in Maplestory. Despite what many people think, Shadowers are actually a very flexible class, showcasing one of the largest changes from 4th job to 5th job. It should also be noted that most of their 5th job skills are based off of old, retired, and fan favorite skills from the 3rd job, Chief Bandit. Taking a look at stats, we can see that there's not really much that they would stand out for on fitting into a specific role on a bossing team, like a support or a burst. A Night Lord could easily out DPS a Shadower with Spread Throw, and a Luminous can probably outmob a Shadower with Reflection and the large AoE that they have in their kit. However, if you take a look down the categories, you can see that there's not really a category that a Shadower is particularly bad in. As a matter of fact, this class has at least one skill that fits into each and every role on a bossing team, which is what makes it perfect for anybody looking for a jack-of-all-trades style class. Assassinate is a single target skill that does an impressive amount of damage on its own and has a couple of perks along with being your main bossing skill. First off, there are two parts to this skill. The first part is a standard 3-hit combo and the second part is a downwards strike, dealing more damage than the first part. Two things of note with this skill. Whenever you use any attack, Assassinate's first part included, you will gain a buff called a kill stack. This buff does nothing on its own, but it can stack up to 3. However, once you accumulate 3 stacks, you get a bonus effect on 2 of your skills. If you use Shadower Instincts, the buff will also give you bonus weapon attack on how many stacks you have. And if you use the Assassinate's second strike, the 3 stacks will be traded in for bonus damage. Even if you have 3 stacks, the bonus actually still applies to the first part of Assassinate as well. Additionally, just by being in Darksight, you will also gain more damage on Assassinate, along with the added effects of Advanced Darksight. Boomerang Stab might be the 4th job skill, but it shares this spot alongside Savage Blow from 2nd job for your main mobbing skill. Actually, these two skills are held in dispute for which one is the better mobbing skill. While Boomerang Stab does hit harder and reach slightly farther, it is overall slower, therefore harder to chain with your flash jump, which is very important when mobbing. Savage Blow, on the other hand, feels much more fluent and it also has a bit more vertical hitbox than Boomerang Stab. However, the speed of this skill is at a cost at its damage, as you will quickly find out that this skill does significantly less damage than Boomerang Stab. The conclusion between these two skills is that if you hit hard enough with Savage Blow to one-shot, use Savage Blow for speed clearing. If not, you should stick to the more powerful Boomerang Stab to secure a one-shot kill on monsters. Meso Explosion is actually stuck in this void of uselessness to some players, but actually, there is a lot of damage coming from this skill. Not by this skill directly, but just how often you use the skill is what makes it good. Allow me to explain. We know that when Pickpocket is active, every time you attack an enemy, they will drop Mesos which can be used for Meso Explosion. And this is where players usually stop, because the damage from Meso Explosion alone is actually not that impressive. However, the fact that players overlooked is that each Meso actually gives you a kill stack. So pretty much, spamming this alongside Assassinate is going to secure the fact that you will have 3 stacks every time you use your second strike. Because this skill doesn't have any casting delay, it means that you can hold both Assassinate and Meso Explosion down to use both skills simultaneously. Alternatively, if you have enough damage, you can also use it for mobbing. Like I've said before, Shadower isn't really lacking in any department. However, do be careful if you plan on training one up, because you will quickly find out pre-5th job Shadower is slightly more stressful of a class to train up than most other classes due to its lack of mobility. However, all of this is going to get fixed with the help of your first 5th job skill that you will get called Shadow Assaulter. This skill on input will blink you quite a good distance in any direction your arrow keys are held in, and is going to serve as a very good mobility skill. I recommend that you put this skill on a button that is going to be very convenient for you to press. Not only is this skill going to be very good for mobbing, it's also very convenient for bossing because it allows you to stick to a boss that moves around a lot, or dodge an attack that would otherwise take you out in one hit. Trickblade is an interesting skill because it acts differently based on the situation that you're in. And in either scenario, this skill is absurdly good for both its amazing damage and usefulness. When used by itself, you will summon fellow bandits to attack monsters in the area. This type of Trickblade is commonly used when you are mobbing and it is very powerful. The hit connection for this skill acts very similar to Chain Lightning from an Ice Lightning Mage or Reflection from the Luminous class, so it's best used when there's a group of mobs in the area in front of you. Now, just by having Trickblade in your V-Matrix allows your Assassinate to apply an injury debuff onto any enemy stacking up to 3 times. This debuff acts like a mark, and if 3 marks are stacked onto one enemy, you can then chain Trickblade into the second part of Assassinate to attack with the second version of Trickblade. This version of Trickblade teleports you behind the marked enemy, stabbing them for an incredible amount of damage. This version of the skill by itself is one of the hardest hitting skills in the game. Additionally, it also grants you 1 second of invincibility. This skill is one of the only true iframes a Shadower gets, and honestly, that's more than enough. Every now and then you're gonna put yourself in a situation that is just bad, and you can't use Trickblade because it's on cooldown, and you can't use Shadow Assault because it's also on cooldown. Well, that's where Smokescreen comes in handy, and this is actually a 4th job skill, but I saved talking about it until now, because it's better to talk about it when you have a better understanding of when you are in danger and are nearly out of options. Now, this skill does a lot of things. Firstly, this skill deploys a smoke in a small area that will make certain attacks not hit you. Secondly, this skill also lowers the damage of percentage HP attacks. Thirdly, at max level, this skill also allows you to stay in dark sight while attacking. Furthermore, any enemy in the smoke will take 20% more crit damage. However, I've not been able to replicate this as of this patch. Lastly, the first and second points apply to your party members, and the third point applies to other Shadowers in the party. It should also be noted that all of these effects will only take place if you are inside the smokescreen. If you are outside, they will not work. You might have noticed that most of the skills we've gone over have a pretty good cooldown. What Shadowers lack until recently is a skill that it would be sort of like an ultimate attack, if you'd call it that. A great example of this is Sonic Blow, our newest skill, and for those of you who have friends that are Shadowers, you have definitely seen this skill in action, maybe once or twice. This skill is going to plant you in place for a couple of seconds, in trade for doing severe amounts of damage to anything within range. Few notes with this skill. Every time your max kill stacks get consumed with Shadower Instincts or Assassinate, the cooldown of this skill will go down by half a second. But just because this skill is constantly off cooldown does not mean you should always use it. Think of this skill like the polar opposite of Trickblade. While Trickblade has a lot of damage and also comes bundled in with the iframe, this skill trades the iframe for even more damage, meaning that using this skill will also leave you vulnerable to attacks. However, the good news is that there's a way around this. Trickblade, use it. Teleporting behind the boss will put you in range to use Sonic Blow, and use the 1 second invincibility to your advantage. It should also be noted that this is our hardest hitting skill, so if your team is trying to coordinate a burst with, let's say, Spirit's Domain and Benediction, you definitely want to have this skill up. So we won't stay on the topic of buffs for too long, but there are some key buffs and passives that we need to talk about. Most of your buffs will last 200 seconds before buff duration, with the exception of 2 skills, one being Maple Warrior. The other is Flip of the Coin. This skill is different because it can only be used when you land a critical hit on an enemy. Now, this skill gives you 10% crit rate and 5% damage, but the important thing about this skill is that it can stack up to 5 times. The important thing to remember about this skill is that the duration is only 2 minutes, meaning that you will have to keep an eye on it and refresh it at full stacks. The good news is that this skill does not have a cooldown, and while it does have certain conditions that need to be met, you can actually still macro this skill if you are having problems. There is another buff that you don't want to use unless certain conditions are met, which is Shadower Instinct. I mentioned earlier that your kill stacks can be consumed by Assassinate, but they can also be consumed by this buff. Based on how many kill stacks you have, you will receive a bonus attack of 0 to 30 alongside the 40 that this buff gives. So it's recommended that you use this when you have max stacks. Just like most classes, you want to hit the attack speed cap so that you can throw your skills out faster. To do this, you're going to want to pick up an Extreme Green Potion from Monster Park and Speed Infusion from either an Equipment Pop or the V-Matrix. Alongside Dagger Booster, you will be at the fastest attack speed for Shadowers. Speaking of decent skills, Shadowers also benefit from Sharp Eyes or Decent Sharp Eyes due to their natural high critical rate from Flip of the Coin and Prime Critical, so you'll definitely want to pick those up as well. In conclusion, when you are fully buffed, you will have Haste, Dagger Booster, Meso Guard, Shadow Partner, Maple Warrior, fully stacked Shadower Instincts, and 5 stacks for Coin Flip. However, SI and SE are also very useful alongside a Green Pot. Obviously in your V matrix you will have your 3 unique skills, but alongside these skills you will want a couple more. Last Resort is a must-have, and it is also going to be when you want to burst. Shadow Walker benefits all Explorer Thieves, but it benefits Shadowers even more because Assassinate does more damage if you are in Darksight. You may also put decent Speed Infusion, decent Sharp Eyes, and Advanced Blessing for even more damage. Shadow Assaulter might be a good skill for mobility, however it does have its cooldown. To balance this out, I recommend picking up Rope Lift from the V matrix. All of these skills are very important, but your 2 Tricores are just as important. Majority of Shadower's damage in bossing is going to come from using Assassinate, so that is going to be your major priority. Meso Explosion is also going to be important as you will be using this skill just as much. The last slots you can go with anything you want. I opted for Shadow Veil, however I have seen some Shadowers go for Sudden Raid, Boomerang Stab, or even Savage Blow. This last slot on both your Tricores is up to you. Get creative. Let me know what you guys would use for these last 2 slots. I've heard a lot of players talking about not being able to Meso cancel, so I decided to go over how to do that. As I mentioned before when I was going over Meso Explosion, the skill does not have any casting delay. So you can hold down Meso Explosion alongside another attack to simultaneously use both skills. The way you do this is that you have to press both attacks on the exact same frame or this will not work. However, some players actually experience a small delay between your Assassinate. This happens because your Meso Explosion is going off twice as normal. Unfortunately, this does not have to do with the game. This actually has to do with your keyboard and how it was manufactured. It's different for every keyboard, so you'll have to keep an eye on which keys work and which keys do not work. For example, in my case, holding down the D and F button does not allow me to Meso cancel. However, holding down the Control and B button, which is what I normally use, allows me to Meso cancel. Shadowers may not feel like they do as much damage as most other classes, but what we lack in specific categories, we make it up with our flexibility. From survivability to mobility to just raw damage with Assassinate, this class brings back a lot of nostalgia to some players, with Trickblade being a reference to Band of Thieves and Shadow Assaulter being a reference to Assaulter. And with each job advancement that you achieve, it really does make it feel like this class takes advantage of all of its skills rather than having it get upgraded versions like many other classes.